Hi everyone, I'm very excited to take you through my Golu for this year. So we'll start from outside and head in. This year I had added some new porch decorations, so that was very exciting. You can see them here. And I made a simpler traditional line and dot column out of chalk. So just try to keep it simple this year. And you can see the new porch decorations. So it was fun to set this up. Now we can go inside. So these are just some simple decorations for the front entrance. And over here at this table are some old paintings that I have found in various places and was able to acquire. So this one is actually over 100 years old. It's from the 1910s and it's in the original frame, so I thought that was very unique, and it's a very beautiful painting. And then the three up here I found at the temple where people sort of leave like unwanted items. So I thought these were great finds and wanted to showcase them. Very unique old paintings, still in really great condition. So I will take you to the main display. So this is everything. I'll do like a little pan. But yeah, we'll start at the main steps and sort of work our way around. So this year I made a couple of new additions that I'm excited about on the main steps. But here's like a view of everything together. So I can start. So one of the new sets, this is a Poikal Kudre, or it's like a fake horse dance. So this is like a traditional dance usually done during temple festivals. And this doll actually bobbles. So that's pretty fun. And it comes in a set of two, so there's like a man and a woman. And then over here is Meenakshi on an unjal, or a swing. So I thought this was a really beautiful one, and everyone has really loved it, so I'm really happy with the way that this one looks. And then going up, so over here on the second shelf from the top in the middle is a five-headed Lord Shiva. So that was pretty unique and another nice addition, I thought. And then on the top shelf, a lot of the stuff is new. So these two dolls, Vishnu Durga on the right and Mailapur Katpahambal on the left, these are both new. And then there is also in the middle, Murhan, Valli, and Devane, those are another new set. And then finally, next to them is this doll of Patti Suram Durga, and that's another new one. So those are all of the new additions for the steps this year. I'll give you one more view of everything together. And another thing I did after last year was touch up a lot of the gold paint for some of the older dolls. So hopefully they look a little brighter and sort of they're shining a little bit more. So I'll start with the theme this year. So my theme was kind of exploring the religious and domestic traditions in northern Sri Lanka and the Jaffna Peninsula, where our family is from, and sort of what makes those set of traditions unique. So I'll start at this little table with this setup. So this is showing some of the important gods and goddesses in our religious tradition, which is called Tamil Saiva Siddhantam. And so that tradition arose in the 5th to the 6th centuries, sort of during the Bhakti movement, which was making Hinduism and specifically Saivism more accessible to people by having a lot of literary works being composed in Tamil so that people could understand them. And so I wanted to show these important gods and goddesses. So in Sri Lanka, most of the temples will have any of these gods or goddesses in their various forms. So this is Ganesha or Pillayar, and he's actually modeled after the Ganesha that's in my dad's village temple in Mulai. So I tried to make that as authentic as I could. Next is Lord Murugan. So he's really important he's seen as like a patron of Tamil culture and language. So he has a lot of temples in Sri Lanka and is very popular there. And then this is this whole setup here, the three in the middle. So this is Nataraja, Sivakami, and Manikavasahar. So Nataraja is a form of Lord Shiva where he's doing the cosmic dance. And Goddess Parvati is seen here as Sivakami Amman. And then sometimes in temples you'll find, with the two of them, you'll also find Manikavasahar, who was a famous poet, and he composed a lot of good poetry and compiled them into the Tiruvasaham. So that was this setup. The next is Goddess Durga, another form of Parvati. In this form, she is in Bhuvaneswari Amman from my mom's village temple in Sudamale. So I wanted to make that as authentic as I could. And then the last one here is Vairavar or Bhairava. And he's sort of like the terrible aspect of Lord Shiva. So even though he is another form of Shiva, there's a lot of temples specifically dedicated to him in Sri Lanka, since he's seen as like a garden deity. So a lot of the villages will have at least one temple to him. Something that I learned was that people even have shrines to him in their yards so that he sort of protects their homes on an individual level. So I thought that was unique. And this representation of him, I sort of hybridized between the traditional Kala Bhairavar, who is standing much like the rest of them, and then like a wandering form of Bhairavar who has the trident over his shoulder and sort of looks like he's on the move. I liked the way that looked, so sort of meshed them together and got this new form. So that is sort of an introduction to what this display is going to be about, some of the more specific traditions that make Tamil Saiva Siddhantam in Sri Lanka unique. So we'll go to the other side of the display. And this is sort of a mashup of a bunch of old items that I have made from the past, and some little dolls to sort of show what are the most important fasts and festivals for our community. So I'll go ahead and start on this side. So over here is a little Shivalingam and Nandi with Shiva. So some of the important fasts and festivals associated with Shiva are Navarathri, and then there's also Tiruvembave and Tiruvadire, and there's also Pradosham, which is the 13th day after the new or full moon. So people do fasting on that day for Lord Shiva as well. And you can also fast either on Monday or Thursday for Lord Shiva. That is also a popular one. And that's why we have, Jupiter, who rules over Thursday, is also up there. So the next set here is talking about Thai Pongal. So that's the harvest festival where we make the little pongal in the middle, have it boil over, and usually put rice and make a sweet rice out of it. And we offer that to the sun god. And a similar thing is done in Chittire for Chittire Tirunal or Chittire Puttandu, which some people think of as the new year in our calendar. So a similar thing is done there. Then the next set is talking about the ways we honor our ancestors. So Chittire Paurnami is on the full moon day in the Chittire month is when we honor our deceased female ancestors. And then Adi Amavase is when we honor our deceased male ancestors. And then Malayam is like a 2-week period that happens right before Navarathri starts, actually. And that's a time where you can perform the last rites for anyone, regardless of when they passed away or who they are. So it's important in our traditions to honor our ancestors. So definitely wanted to include that. And these are actually Amma and Appa's parents here. So I thought that was a nice touch. The next set is talking about all the different Amman festivals or the goddess festivals. So the whole month of Adi, which is like mid-July to mid-August, is very auspicious for Amman. So here I have like Adi Valli is Adi month Fridays, and Adi Chavai or Adi month Tuesdays are really important for fasting, as well as Adi Puram, which is another Amman festival. And then outside of that month, during Praktasi Masam, there's Kedara Gauri Viradam that some people have keep for 21 days. And then year round, we do Friday fasting. So I have Venus here because the goddess is seen as the overlord of Venus, and Venus rules over Friday. So we do year-round Friday fasting for the goddess as well. Then this next set is talking about Navarathri, which is the festival that we're currently in. So the biggest part of this festival for us is Saraswati Puja, which is what I've sort of shown here, where we lay out all of the books and kids pray for getting a good education. And this happens on the 9th day of Navarathri. And then in the same month, in Praktasi, the Saturdays are very auspicious for Saturn. So people do fasts on Saturday as well to get on his good side. So after Navarathri is over is when we have Deepavali and Kartike Deepam and Vilakudu, which are all light and fire associated festivals. So I have like the big flames that they put up in the temples, and the sweets and the small candles that we light up at home. And lastly, we have, for Lord Murugan, we have Kandasashti that happens around the same time, which is a 6-day fast. And then in the temples, they'll do Sura Samharam, which is a reenactment of his battle with the demons. And then there's also Taipusam and Vaikasi Visaham, which are also celebrated for him. And then Murugan rules over Mars, and Mars corresponds to Tuesday. So people also keep fasts on Tuesday for Lord Murugan. So just a brief, condensed overview of all the different important fasts and festivals in our tradition. So next in the display, I looked into the Arvati Mundu Nayanmarhal, or the 63 Nayanmars, who are saints from the 3rd to the 8th century in response to the spread of Buddhism and Jainism in South India. They revived the Saiva tradition, and they composed the Tirumurai, which I have sections of listed here, which are sort of the basis for the Saiva Siddhanta tradition that I was talking about earlier. So I'll go in briefly. The Tirumurai is in 12 parts. So the first 3 books are composed by Thirugnana Sambandar, and the first 7 books, in total are called Thevaram. So the first 3 books by Thirugnana Sambandar, some of the important passages that we learn are Pidiyadan Uruvumai, Thodudaya Seviyan, and Mandiramavadaniru. Then books 4 to 6 are composed by Tirunavakarasar. He composed Kutrainavaru, Madar Purai Kanni, Masil Vunayum, and Sotrinai Vediyan. Moving on to book 7, this was composed by Sundarar. So we're still in the Thevarams, and his famous one was Pitta Purai Suri. Book 8 is now called Tiruvasaham, and that was composed by Manika Vasahar, who we saw earlier, and he composed the Siva Puranam in Tamil. And then book 9 was split into 2, so Tiruvisaipa and Tirupallandu, and they have several authors, and so there's also some good passages in there. But I made these small little models, so I'll show a little close-up. So these are just made out of cardstock and colored pencil. I cut them out and propped them up so that they look sort of like little statues. And so you'll find these in some Saiva temples in Sri Lanka where they have all 63 of them laid out around the temple. So I have about half of them laid out on this side, and then the other half continue on to the other side. So before we go see the rest of them, here is another big part of the display this year is this little model that I made of the Nellore temple in Sri Lanka. So this is in Jaffna, and it's kind of a huge cultural and physical landmark. So I thought it was very appropriate to capture this because it's kind of at the center of the religious life there. So this temple started in the 13th century, but when the Dutch came, they destroyed it a couple of times and put up churches. So the location kept changing, but it's in its current location from 1734, and it's been built up to the present state, which is like what my model looks like now. So everything here is made out of foam board and cardstock. So all these little details are drawn on colored pencil, and I try to capture as much as I could of what the temple, at least on the outside, looks like. So I couldn't do too much on the inside. And then here are some pillars in the front and little doorkeepers and things like that, small details. And I will go ahead and turn the lights on. I didn't do that, so you can see that a little bit better. But yeah, so with the lights on, you can see that a little bit better. And then there are 4 temple towers and 6 bell towers. So try to capture all that. This is the Puntotem, or the garden section of it. And here are some of the bell towers. So they all have little bells in them. And the roof tiles are just made out of cardstock as well. And these are some of the main shrines. So like this, these are where the main idols are kept. And then this is another courtyard with a little path around it, and the kuni, or the temple tank that they use for the Tirtham festival. And then here's the other Gopuram. So this temple is really well known for its annual Tiruvilla, or festival that lasts for 25 days. And it's also known very much for being on time, for being very punctual. So I'll also briefly go into Siva Yohaswamy was a spiritual teacher from Sri Lanka, and he did a lot of his like formative spiritual years in Nellore near this temple. And he has a lot of good thoughts that his disciples wrote down about life, and his big philosophy was Tannai Ari, which means know thyself. So he was a really important figure in Sri Lanka. And then we have Aramuha Navalar, who was from Nellore, and he also worked to revive the Saiva tradition amidst Christian missionaries converting people in the 1800s. So his work is also very well known. And the last thing I wanted to show here is from our prayer room, this picture of the Nellore Utsavamurti Aramuha Swami on the Valli Simhasanam. So this is like a really well-known image, and everyone goes to this temple for the Tiruvilla, and it's really well done. So I wanted to capture that here. So this is this part of the display, and then we'll move to the other side. Okay, so going into some of the domestic traditions, I've made this little model of a traditional house in Sri Lanka. So we call this Nattaravuru, or it's a courtyard house. So again, like the other model, a lot of this is made out of foam board and cardstock, some poster board in there. But I try to capture some of the key elements, which the big one is there's this open courtyard. So I have like little plants in here and pillars, a little kolam, and some lights. But the big part was this open courtyard that was open to the sky and let a lot of light in. And then I also added some small details here, like little pictures above the doors, the mango leaves, the wood pillars, and the kolam design. Then there's the easy chair, which I made out of cardstock, and some metal chairs, which I got from the store, so I cheated a little bit on that, but I thought they looked nice. And then they have these little side rooms, so there's some little pictures above those to make it look a little authentic. And we have these little pots with flowers in them that are actually made out of wooden beads that I painted to look like clay pots. And then oil pastel to make the plants. And it's a little hard to tell because it's bright out, but there's lights underneath. So there'll be some pictures where you can see it in the dark and the lights kind of shine through these like little architectural features. And The windows are again made out of cardstock. But yeah, so some of the interesting things that I found while I was researching this was that in the olden days, before European influences, the porches and even inside wouldn't be flat like this. They would have level changes. So they would have sunken paths called nade, which are walkways, and they would have raised platforms called tinne, which are basically built-in seating or sleeping areas. But once European furniture was introduced during the Portuguese and Dutch rule, there's no need for level changes anymore. So they had shifted from that to having flat floors inside and outside and long verandas outside instead of these split up porches. And then another thing was how the rooms around the house used to be very small. They wouldn't have windows because they were really only meant for sleeping or for storing valuables, but more emphasis was placed on spending time in the common areas around the courtyard. So I thought that was pretty neat, and something that has shifted over time as new ideals have come up in the community. But here's another view of this before we move on from the side. And then I also wanted to include these little dolls, a lady using an ammi, which is like a grindstone, and then the kunaru, or the well, which are both pretty typical features of a traditional home. And then we have the rest of the Arvati Munda Nine Madhal continuing around this side of the room. And like I said, the Tirumurai has 12 books, so continuing back at book 10 is a Tirumandiram composed by Tirumular. So from that, Aindu Karattane is like a really well-known one, although it's kind of unsure whether he composed it or whether someone put it in there after, not sure, but the rest of the Tirumandiram is about like yoga and healthy living practices, so it's a very interesting read. Book 11 is called Prabandham, and there's a series of authors for that one. Book 12 is the Periya Puranam by Circular Swami, and I included Ulahelam as the passage from that. So outside of the Tirumurai, there are some other important religious texts, so I included some of them here. Abhirami Andadi was composed by Abhirami Bhattar, and some famous passages from that are Tanam Tarum and Maniye Maniyin Oliye. So those are some well-known ones. And then moving on, so another famous one is Tirupugal. So this is written by Aruna Girinadar, and he composed this mostly in praise of Lord Murugan. So you have Kaitala Nirei Kani, which is about Pullayar, and then Urimayil, which is about Murugan. So those are ones that we definitely learned. And then since it's Navarathri time, Sakala Kala Vallimale is by Sri Kumara Gurupara Swamihal, and he wrote this about Saraswati. So again, since Saraswati Puja is the biggest event for us, we always make sure to sing this, and this is an important one. So that is everything from this year's display, and I'll zoom out again to give you an overall view of everything. But yeah, I'm glad that I could share this with everyone in this video, and I hope everyone has had a good Navarathri, and looking forward to next year's display already. Thank you.